Hello, thank you very much. And thanks to all for being here. Thanks for the invitation. Hopefully you can see my slides at this point and you can hear me. That works. Yes. Yeah, very good. All right. So what I will do today, I'll talk about some European projects that we've been doing in the field of digital ethics, let's say, AI ethics, also on virtual reality. And of course, in the process, we will see some interesting problems and some interesting questions that appear, which I hope we will be able to discuss after that. I'll start with a project that is close to conclusion called Tech Ethos. So this is a European project, as many other projects. In this project, we particularly looked at extended reality and a little bit on natural language processing. So this was before, of course, you're all saying, how about generative AI? Well, this particular one was before generative AI. So we developed here a methodology of how you think about these ethical questions of emerging technologies, very new technologies, and this is published. Of course, the methodology is not unique, but it's quite developed, and how you arrive at relevant values and principles. So this particular project was not about taking values and principles and sort of making them operational, you will see that later, but about formulating relevant values and principles that actually are important for let's say, extended reality or for natural language processing. And to give you a glimpse of how that work was done, we were, of course, talking here about applications, about technologies, looking at use cases, as we always do. And we arrived at a list of values and principles that have a specific meaning for extended reality, but also, and this is perhaps unique to this Tech Ethos project, we looked at core ethical dilemmas. Core ethical dilemmas, preference between virtual and material. Are they part of one reality? Is there a moral stance to be put forward here? Is one to be preferred to the other? And the equivalence principle that I'll comment on a little later. So in Tech Ethos project, what we've done in more pragmatic terms is that we've looked at some of these values and principles, like transparency or non-manipulation, and we've asked concretely what the problems are, if you like, what exactly transparency means for extended reality, what exactly non-manipulation means. And I would like in this brief talk to maybe mention one or two controversies, open questions. So with regard to transparency and XR, we think that the question of who's behind an avatar is very important. This is not something that you will see in the current debate on, let's say, the AI Act or any other regulation. We are not yet at that level on the debate on XR ethics. So do we need to maintain a distinction on who's behind an avatar? Is it an AI system? Is it a human? Is it let's say, a company, maybe a corporation? And this is important for establishing rules for shared responsibility, knowing the status. This is also important for a very touchy question of virtual sanctions in virtual reality. Are they supposed to be copies of material world sanctions or some unique kinds of sanctions if there is a problem? So how do we even understand responsibility and a retribution mechanism, sanctions in the virtual worlds? Now, this question of maintaining distinctions is also important for natural language processing. And for today, we all know about generative AI. So in Tech Ethos project, we talked about watermarks as a solution to maintain distinctions on the provenance of a content. So here again, maintaining distinctions is a unique, specific principle that we've put forward in this project. And provenance or history, if you like, are important. Because we need to evaluate, to know the story, to evaluate humans and machines separately in particular. So we're pretty happy today that these kinds of debates are also part of the ongoing G7 Hiroshima process. And you know that in the Hiroshima process, among the principles for advanced AI systems, whatever that term means, there is principle 7 about watermarking and provenance mechanism. So we're quite happy that these results have been seen at the level of G7, and the European Commission, as you know, is right now doing a consultation. It closes today at 1 p.m. Central European time, a consultation on these principles. So I think Michalis, who's speaking after me, will maybe say a few words about this. So this is a parallel process to the AI Act, nothing to do with the European AI Act. This is international G7 Hiroshima process. Now, in a different project called IREX, we went a little further and we said, well, okay, if in projects like Tech Ethos, we arrived at values and principles, now we need to look at what all of these things, how we can teach them, what goes into trainings to engineers and also to ethics evaluators. So the IREX project, which has reached about, I think it's half lifetime at this point. It's another project run by the ethics sector of DG Research. And in this project, we're looking at different technologies, 2 of which are relevant for our discussion today: AI in healthcare, and again, extended reality. And there are 2 more that are more relevant for bioethics. We have identified gaps in ethics evaluation processes and the needs for training. Again, after me, Michalis Kritikos will talk about this now famous Chapter 8 of the European ethics evaluation process. But how exactly we deal with AI systems, say here in healthcare or with XR systems, needs to be further understood. We have formulated here some recommendations, and I'll show you some of them. And in the next half of the project, in the second half of the project, we will be doing trainings. So there will be trainings available across Europe on concrete applications like AI ethics in healthcare applications or XR. So some of these recommendations, if you look at them, I think are pretty interesting for our discussion today. We have seen that on all digital technologies, it regularly comes up that research ethics committees, or RECs, are not really sufficiently professional, don't have enough IT professionals to evaluate the IT component of a research project. So we recommend on AI in healthcare to add to the usual RECs some IT professionals, or for projects in extended reality, even to establish digital ethics committees. And the reason why you have this in red is that this is very controversial. Talking to experts in the field of digital ethics, we've seen this recommendation pop up in many interviews and in many consultations. But once you take this out of the field of digital ethics and you present this recommendation to bioethicists or to policymakers, many of them object. Now, this point is very controversial, definitely something I would like to hear today and be in the discussion, to hear about in the discussion. Do we really need to have digital ethics committees on a par with bioethical committees, biomedical committees? Or do we need to include IT professionals in the existing RECs? What kind of procedure is the best procedure for evaluating ethical questions in AI research projects or XR research projects? Now, more recommendations here, specifically to, I would say, AI in healthcare, because it's a big part of the AI Act. The guidelines are very different. You know that there are guidelines coming from the AI Act. There are also guidelines coming from the Directive of Medical Devices. There are also national guidelines, which are pretty different across different EU member states. So it's not quite clear whether we want to make a uniform and coherent guidance on AI in healthcare and at what level. So this is a big open question. And of course, it's not just for healthcare. If you look at AI, let's say for security, or AI for I don't know, human behavior or things like this, you will have similar problems. And finally, one other recommendation that will take me also to my next slide is the story of going beyond compliance. Now, this conference, its title says Beyond Compliance. I guess you all agree that we need to go beyond compliance, but what exactly does that mean? The AI Act, of course, will have some compliance mechanisms, but going beyond compliance with the AI Act doesn't mean that we do ethics by design as a sort of general methodology of designing AI systems. That's the usual understanding of going beyond compliance. Now, what exactly ethics by design means, how to do it, to do it in some standard way, these are all open questions. And this takes me to my next slide. I will also speak about a couple of projects where we're doing AI ethics and ethics by design on concrete use cases. One of these projects is called Multi-Rate, and this is AI for security. And the other project has just started, and it's called Soprano, and this is AI ethics for robotics. And this is specifically applying ethics by design, going beyond compliance on 4 concrete use cases. So things like agricultural robots or construction robots or other kinds of robots. But I will focus today not so much on Soprano, it's just starting, but mostly on Multi-Rate. Now, what we see on Multi-Rate, in the Multi-Rate project, what we saw is that when you want to do ethics by design, very quickly people ask you to give them an instrument. Engineers want a tool which lets them evaluate what they call ethics readiness levels. And now this term has entered today in the language of Brussels. The European Commission, as you probably know, has many different calls for ethics readiness levels. Philosophically, it doesn't mean much. Philosophically, if I put on my philosopher hat, of course, there is no such thing as ethics readiness level. But in terms of managing a project, this is something that people want, and we've tried to build one. So we've built a tool, which is not public at this point, a tool to evaluate different, and here we have 4 ethics readiness levels, 1 to 4, in terms of characterization and control over ethical and privacy issues. We also have built a tool, a web-based tool, a pretty simple tool, using HLAG Altai checklist, and also using similar products for GDPR or for the forthcoming AI Act. We're trying to develop that. So the tool is something that will not replace a human conversation about ethics, but something that should be helping engineers to evaluate whether they need to think more, to reflect more, to talk more about ethics or not. So something that gives them physically a number, ethics readiness level. That's not very interesting, but hopefully it will push them to actually think more about how to get a better score. So this tool has a module on the AI Act, and Altai has a robotics module for Soprano, has a security module for Multi-Rate, has a GDPR module. Again, this tool does not replace ethical thinking. This is what we do in all fields of science and technology ethics. But this is something that helps people to manage a project, to evaluate whether they need to do more or whether they're already pretty well off. We found out that this is very much in need and in demand from industry. They want these kinds of tools, and this is part of ethics by design for them. So even if we think that, of course, ethics is not about numbers or scores, we need to understand the demand for going beyond compliance from industry. So I'll stop and I'll just maybe tell you a little story. I always tell stories at the end. At the very different end of this ethics beyond compliance panel, we've just talked about scores and numbers. Well, here's an argument in favor of narrative methods. And this is an old story. You may know the story. The story is about this young boy called Tobias, who is accompanied on a trip. He's very young. He's 16 years old. He's traveling, and he's accompanied by an angel. And an angel is, of course, as we say today, an avatar with an LLM agent. So an agent, you can think about this angel not as a material entity, but as an avatar in virtual reality. You can think about this angel as being able to speak, so having a large language model, what we call today an LLM agent. And at the end of the day, Tobias is tired, and he goes into a river to wash himself, and he sees a big fish, and he's very afraid. He's very frightened, and he cries, and the angel doesn't tell him, don't be afraid. The angel tells him what to do. He says, take that fish by the gill and draw that fish to the shore, and then take such and such organ, and you will be able to make useful medicines out of that fish. And this is, of course, a mythological story, and it always needs interpretation, as any mythological story. Was the fish big or small? Why was Tobias afraid? And one of the answers would be to say, well, this was something completely new. Tobias had never seen a big fish. As we users of new technologies, we don't have any experience using these technologies, and that provokes fear. Novelty provokes fear. And the angel gets over and beyond that fear, takes Tobias over and beyond that fear, not by saying, don't be afraid, but by showing direct utility, direct usefulness. How do you use this fish to make useful medicines? So what digital ethics is supposed to do is to take us by hand, as you see on this picture by Filipino Lippi, to walk us through that world of fear, to show us usefulness and utility of technology, and to get us to where Tobias was able to get when he was able to cure his father at the end of this story. But of course, this is just one lesson of this myth, the lesson for digital ethics. Take the user and the designer by hand and walk them through this world of fear of novelty. But there is also a second lesson. Look, we are not on the angel side, we're on the human side. We're on the side of Tobias in this story. So like Tobias, we are tired and afraid, and we look at the screen of our devices, which is dark, a little bit like the night around Tobias. It's late in the day, and he needs to go through that night and dawn the next day, and dawn of the next day is not near yet. So there is a long road to go, and that is something for all of us to think about and to construct together as a story, as a narrative for the user, for the designer, and not only as an industrial score, as we do also in some European projects on readiness levels. So digital ethics beyond compliance is all of this, is building readiness levels, but also building narratives. And this whole exercise is on us, and dawn is not yet near. Thank you.